Hi, everybody, and welcome as we continue our journey to Jerusalem, our Lent readings, meditations. Our reading today is Mark 15, verses 37 to 38. For all of the gospel writers, the final act of the drama of Jesus' earthly life is acted out in darkness. There's both a physical and a spiritual darkness. From noon, the hour of execution, darkness came over the whole land. The sun light fails. Now, it may have been an eclipse. Luke seems to suggest that, or a dust storm. The spiritual cause, though, for that darkness is perhaps more straightforward. That creation itself can't bear the sight of the Creator's Son being put to death. Even the sun hides its face. There's a moral darkness as well, a moral darkness to the abuse of power, the rejection of reason, the voice of scorn and hatred aimed at a helpless man on a cross. Soldiers gambling, religious leaders shouting crude insults, innocent bystanders being dragged from the crowds and humiliated. Three human beings having their bodies torn apart slowly and remorselessly under the heat of the dust-laden afternoon. And yet, in the darkness, each account also records little beacons of hope, indications that perhaps, the story's not over yet. In the end, light and love and sheer goodness might just find a way. Oh, it's hard to see. And yet we've seen some of it already. The penitent thief seeking and finding acceptance and forgiveness at the very point of death. The centurion recognizing in the dying man proof not of guilt, but of innocence. The words of Jesus forgiving the very soldiers who were crucifying him. John, in his gospel, undoubtedly intends his readers to understand that the final cry of Jesus from the cross was also a sign of hope. Not an admission of defeat, but a claim of victory. It is finished. Finished in the sense of accomplished. Finished in the sense of achieved. It takes us back to the previous evening and the prayer of Jesus just before his betrayal and arrest. I glorify you on earth by finishing the work that you gave me to do. The other three Gospels also record another and more symbolic image of hope. Each one reports that as Jesus was crucified, the curtain, the temple, was torn in two from top to bottom. This curtain or veil had its origins in the portable tabernacle that was once the center of Israelite worship on their wilderness journey from Egypt to the promised land. It separated the Holy of Holies from the holy place, and only the high priest was ever permitted to pass through it on the Day of Atonement. And when he did, he was bearing in a vessel the blood of a sacrificed bull or ox, which he sprinkled on the altar of atonement for the sins of the people. The tabernacle signified the earthly presence of Yahweh, the Lord God, whose dwelling was in heaven, and the Holy of Holies was the location at which that presence was to be encountered. It was undoubtedly, a place of fear and trembling as the high priest made his way through the curtain once a year, the golden bells on the fringe of his robe, letting the people outside know that he was still living and moving, even though standing in the awesome presence of God. Tradition also says that a rope was attached to his ankle so that in the event of his collapsing or being struck down, those outside could haul him back through the curtain. Everybody else was kept strictly outside at arm's length. Whatever happened, the only way to God was through the priestly sacrifice. Only through the intercession of the high priest on his own before God could the sins of the whole people be forgiven. That curtain, that veil was both a barrier and an entrance, a barrier to ordinary people like you and me, an entrance for the anointed high priest. The God of heaven and earth was prepared to submit his son to a criminal's death so that sins could be forgiven in the light of that. How could any of us doubt that high price paid for those sins? The Holy of Holies was in Jewish thought the place where heaven and earth intersected, where the kingdom of light and love interlocked with the kingdom of frailty and failure. Yeah, it's not a place that people could freely visit. Just one man, and he is frail, infallible as the rest. Now, the temple curtain is torn. Good Friday symbolizes a spiritual revolution. As Tom Wright puts it, the place where God's space and man's space intersects and interlocks is no longer the temple in Jerusalem. It's in Jesus himself. That is what makes Good Friday good. Oh, there was much that was going on that was bad, incredibly bad, but carved into that rock face, we can imagine the words, God so loved the world that he gave his only son. The driving force behind the whole event was not the evil of man, strong and powerful as that can be, but the love of God. The love of God, which in the end is irresistible.